And it was actually also the death of my friend Simon that also pushed me in this direction to speak up, because I realized when I was looking back at myself, if I had continued to go down in my isolation, if I couldn't break the pattern, the negative spiral there, and stop the alcohol, I don't know if I would have been around today. And that was the realization I had in 2019 when I lost my friend Simon, because I had no idea what he was going through. No one of our friends had any idea. He had, in fact, just been on a trip that he said was the journey of his lifetime. He had saved up money. He went to Mount Everest. He climbed to the base camp, and he shared pictures, and everything looked so fantastic. And he shared on social media pictures of him and the girlfriend, and he wrote, "I've never been luckier or happier." And so that was all we saw. So when he was gone, it was just so sudden. And I became so sad and so angry also at the same time. And as often we blame perhaps ourselves, I wish I could have done more and so on. And that's when I decided to take action. And I decided to really openly talk about my own journey and how I broke out isolation. And I set up a charity fund also to raise awareness and money for suicide prevention. And this is something that I'm still doing today. And I'm there for men, especially because normally same gender want to have these close conversations.
Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion. Learn the truth behind the alcohol myths and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I am so looking forward to this conversation today because I have Nick Jonsson coming to us from Sweden. And so while it's early in the morning here, it is evening in Sweden, but you also have a beautiful background that is your other home, a picture of your home in Thailand. So Nick has an international background, a background in business, and we're going to have a conversation around executive loneliness, leadership, sobriety, all of the good things that come when we start to explore what happens when we stop drinking. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Terry. It's great to be here and talk about the topic that is so close to my heart. Thank you.
Yes, I feel the same. I asked you this very important question, and I'll ask it again. When you stopped drinking, do you feel like that was the catalyst to the life that you have now?
It was a complete change. It's like a complete reset. It's two different lives altogether.
Yes, and I feel that way so much too. And I know because you also are a life coach and you work with people on their alcohol-free journey. There's sometimes this disconnect of how life changes. So how do you share that with people? Like, what do you tell them when they say, how is this possible? Or how does life change? What do you tell people?
Well, first of all, I kept it very secret the first year because many of these programs, when you come into recovery, are anonymous and you have all this stigma and you're not supposed to talk about it. And I didn't do that for a year. But then people were wondering, Nick, what's the big transformation? Tell us, what's the secret? What's the secret? And everyone was asking, family were asking, friends were asking. And in the end, I thought, this is crazy. I need to share it. So then I said, well, I have become sober. I changed my relationship with alcohol. I no longer drink. And as I shared that, then people were so curious. They wanted to know more. They wanted to understand more. And then increasingly, people wanted also to know how can they change their relationship with alcohol because they saw the big transformation.
That's so beautiful. And it's so powerful that our lived experience is really the best example. And you bring up an important point that because we're changing from the inside, our outside looks different. Like people notice. And it's interesting also. So I did not go to recovery meetings. I was not anonymous. I didn't actually have any support system when I stopped drinking. I just stopped drinking. It was time. And so I did the opposite, Nick. I actually went out and told everyone, I'm not drinking anymore. Like I used to drink. I'm not doing that anymore. And so for me, it may have been partly for accountability. I didn't really think of it that way at the time. But I do think you bring up an important point about people, do we stay? Do we do it in secret? Do we share it publicly? When is the right timing to tell people? So what do you advise people when they ask that question? Like, should I tell people? What do you usually recommend?
I believe that we are transforming to a more open world where we can share more honestly what is on our mind. And I'm a big believer of having honest, deep conversations. And I think one of the major issues is the taboo and the stigma of keeping these things secret. So I'm a big believer that it should be open. I would have come into recovery most likely many, many years before if it wasn't treated like a secret society, because I knew I had problems before. I was trying to look up help. I was trying to find it. But because it was so secret and because there was so much stigma around it, I couldn't find it. And the moments when you really need it, that might be a short window when you are ready and open to get that help. And I didn't get it. And then you sort of recover, and then you might, reduce your alcohol for a while, and then it's not a big issue, but then it pops up again. So yeah, I believe that you did it right. And I'm glad that I followed your approach 1 year into my recovery. And at least I've been an open book about it for over 5 years now. And that's the best thing I ever done.
Yes, I agree. I think I love what you said, that it's important to have these honest, deep conversations. And part of this journey, I know for me and so many of my clients, is getting more comfortable in our own skin, being able to be vulnerable and show up and be more authentic. And I find it fascinating that often we were drinking in secret, and then we stopped drinking and we do it in secret. And it's like there's something broken there. And so I love that you encourage people to share what's happening on the inside. I think that level of support, we often have this story that people are going to respond badly, that they're going to, not trust us, or they're going to judge us. And so often that's just a story in our head.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree with you also. And I even heard of couples who got relationship problems because they stopped drinking, but it wasn't because they stopped drinking. It was because they were going to get support, and the partner was wondering if the other person had an affair or what were they doing that they couldn't disclose. Who are they seeing? And it doesn't matter if you go and see a coach or you go to a recovery meeting or some other support group. If you're secret about it, people are going to be suspicious. And I believe that one of the major benefits of stopping the alcohol is that we can be more authentic and be more ourselves. So therefore, I think we should speak about the issues we have, and that we are seeking help for it. And these days I say that talking about my sobriety and is one of my greatest strengths, Terry, and the most beautiful opportunities in my whole life have come just from having these conversations.
Yes, 100%. I agree with that. Thank you for that. So because you work as an executive coach and you help leaders, what is the stigma what do leaders worry about? Like, what do they worry about going public for their professional persona? What are the barriers there for someone changing their relationship with alcohol because of potentially that, oh, people are going to know and it's going to harm my professional life?
Yeah, many people are trying to get a support anonymously. So I'm also a certified sober coach from UK, London, the sober club there. And I gone through the materials. And when I speak with people, I'm very open up front to them. There's different kind of supports, and I'm laying it out about recovery programs that are there. Many are run by volunteers and they are complimentary and so on. But for most of them, actually, they are not ready to go in and be seen in a big meeting with many people. Secondly, they might not be ready at that stage to go in and say, I'm an alcoholic. So they prefer to have this one-on-one, exclusive, private, anonymous place, a safe place where they can talk about their challenges. And I think that's a beautiful way to start. And you rather than being completely exposed in day one. In that aspect, I'm quite pleased with my own recovery that at least for 1 year I was in a safe space and I didn't have to disclose it to the whole world. I might not have been ready for that. That was how I was. I was very sick when I came into the recovery. Everyone is different and every person will have a different story. But I do believe in the end that it's great that we have different kind of support and different offers for individuals. So if people want the group support and so on, then it's there as well.
I'm not familiar with the Sober Club. I'll have to check that out because it sounds awesome. So what do you see? How do you see people's leadership capabilities? What changes when alcohol is removed?
A lot of things are changing, Terry, and that's why it's normally brought up by many of my coaching clients, even if they don't come to me about alcohol, even if sobriety wasn't on their mind. But as we are working together and as we're getting to know each other, and if we work on the wheel of life as a life coach, eventually comes the health. And then alcohol is normally brought up. And if you are an executive, then typically you might be traveling a lot. You go to business functions. There's always alcohol available, and there will tend to be too much of it. So it's brought up, it's raised, and then they want to work on it. And then as you start to ask what are the issues, what are the challenges around alcohol, and what's your relationship with it, and it's uncovering that it's actually a big burden for them for many reasons, because as we know from everything from keeping a good weight and being in good shape and to exercise, it's destroying all of these matters. And then that's just on the body part and the physical appearance and so on. And then when you come into professional relationships, they will almost always, I should say, be issues with the relationship with a partner, with mistrust and so on. There will be issues. And those things, when you talk about it, then naturally, if you are a high-performing individual and you want to grow yourself, then that is normally part of the equation that we need to discuss that. And therefore, almost half of my coaching clients are normally mentioning that they want to, reduce the alcohol consumption. And some of them have even stopped when we work together.
Yeah, I love that, because we often, I think the saying is that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I've actually had clients and other fellow coaches and colleagues say, I was working on, my nutrition or my weight loss or my business skills, and I realized there is this other thing that might be having an impact. And as you and I know, the alcohol misuse and drinking and over drinking drives a lot of other behaviors, and certainly impacts from physical, etc. You also have a book, I love that, that talks about executive loneliness. So in my mind, I think there's probably some connection to alcohol being isolating and keeping us in this place where maybe we are not living out our full potential. What are the other impacts, and why did you call your book Executive Loneliness? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so as I was in recovery myself, and as I mentioned before, many people asked me what had changed in me, what was it, and what was the switch. And as I explained to them, yes, I stopped drinking alcohol, but then they also asked, how did I get the support and how did I get the help? And that's when I said, well, I've been in a recovery program. I've been getting structure. I had a sponsor. I had a coach. I had people to guide me and help me through this. And then that's when people ask me, how can I get that support? And I kept writing down all my learnings, everything I went through. So my book is really a summary of the support that I got. It's everything from including the recovery program steps. It's also tools and guides and so on for people who are curious to explore what would recovery look like. And I also would say that for me, isolation and loneliness is linked to alcohol because it's driving it. And I am an introvert myself. I could be acting like an extrovert when I was consuming alcohol, but behind the scene and the day after and so on, I realized that it was not me, and I always felt full of shame, and I also didn't like myself. So I was always drinking when I was going out, and these days I do different things. I go out in the nature, I go out cycling, I do other things. I don't go and hang in the bars in the evening.
Yeah, yes. So this idea of executive loneliness. So I think there's this mental health piece. I think that you work with a lot of men, so maybe there is this bit of a gender divide around the ways that we ask for help, the identified areas. What do you see as unique to executives when it comes to loneliness, mental health, alcohol use?
Well, as they say, it's lonely at the top, and that's true. If you are in a big organization and you are the CEO, then you're the only one in the whole organization at that level. But it's also true if you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, you're running your own business, and even for a coach, it can also be quite lonely in that case if we are not aware about it, and if we are not creating safe spaces, and we are not proactively building connections with people that is so essential that we need as a human being. So if we are at that level and we are trying to act like we have all the answers because we are perhaps the boss and people are treating us like the boss and they're coming to us for answers. And if we are then responding to this, which is what I did, because that's the way I learned from my colleagues as I was working my way up and my bosses, then I was not vulnerable. I didn't surround myself with coaches and mentors and mastermind groups and peer groups. And I was scared to admit when I didn't have the answers. And that is what I've seen in many other CEOs and senior executives as well, that at least, when you are on the other side of the coin here, when you are open, when you're vulnerable, then you are surrounding yourself with people who be there for you, and then you break the loneliness. But that was not the space I was ready to be in before.
Yeah, I agree. And as a entrepreneur and a solopreneur, when we run our own businesses from our home, it's so important that we prioritize having support, having connection, and networking. And it looks very different these days when we're in different parts of the globe and we're working from home. And so, yeah, I think that's such a beautiful offer to help executives understand that. We don't have to fall into this place of loneliness, and we don't have to isolate, and we don't have to be that one man standing at the top. We actually can create community. And so you mentioned mastermind group. Will you tell us a little bit about how you define mastermind and work with people? Because my audience may not be as familiar with what is a mastermind and how can this be helpful?
Yeah, so a mastermind, according to me, is a group of like-minded where you can create a safe space between you, where you can have sharings. And I do this in many forms, and it can be everything from with my triathlon groups that I have a small group of people there. We like the same hobby, we speak the same language, and we can create a small group where we can do best practice sharing and help each other with training tips and so on. But I'm also professionally running peer groups, which is very similar to mastermind groups. It just means that the peer group is something that we as an organization are organizing. We book the venue, we prepare the agenda, we have the facilitator, and still though, it's people at the same level. So when we talk about senior executives, it will be groups for HR leaders, it will be groups for CEOs, vice presidents, and then depending on how big the P&L is, so they're meeting with people with other people with similar responsibility, and they talk the same language. They will have the similar challenges, and they can help each other. So in that way, it's almost like a peer-to-peer coaching environment where they are learning from each other. I'm these days also helping CEOs to set up these mastermind groups for themselves, And I'm helping right now one of my clients to establish this. And he is creating now, my client who I'm coaching is creating a list of what would be the other companies in your city that would be on a similar scale like you. Perhaps the leader is at your age, but you're not a competitor. So he's drawing out this list. We would then do a charter, and he's going to invite these other business people and form a mastermind group. And they will create then an agenda. They meet perhaps once a month for 4 hours when they will discuss the challenges they're facing and helping each other to solve them. So that is a mastermind and a peer group in my wording.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love that concept. I actually, with another fellow colleague, a sober coach as well, Maggie Claussens, her and I have created a business community. It's not exactly a mastermind, but it is a place to come for support. You know, we have connection calls and co-working sessions, and we encourage one another. And, you know, it's so powerful to have something where we can, you know, like you said, share best practices. And I think it really does help us with this place of feeling isolated or this loneliness epidemic. I know out of the pandemic, we were able to shine a light on mental health. We were able to see that a lot of people are living in isolation. And suddenly, when our world shrank and we saw who really had a support system, I think there was so much discovery around, do you as an individual have a support system? And so having peer groups and having masterminds is really a beautiful way to enrich our business life.
Yes, absolutely. To have that community is just essential. So if someone is in whatever profession you're in, if you are a sober coach, then team up with 7, 8 other sober coaches in different provinces or states or different areas or different countries. And then you can get together and share, because again, you will have similar challenges. You will feel supported. And it's just, everyone loves it. If you approach someone asking, hey, I'm setting up this mastermind group, would you like to be part of it? And if someone feels that perhaps they're not ready to set up these themselves, then there are a lot of companies also in the US. You have Vistage, for example, who does it for CEOs over there.
Yes, yes. And I think you bring up a good point, is that we don't have to do this alone, nor should we. Having a support system, even as an individual, is a huge part of creating success around whether it's changing your relationship with alcohol or all of the other transitions we go through in midlife. And, you know, I follow a gentleman called Chip Conley who has Modern Elder Academy, and he just wrote a book about midlife. And I think that sometimes we also need peer groups and support groups around these transitions we go through, as maybe, you know, our children leave for college, we move into retirement, we might or we might cut back our work hours. We might start a passion project like you and I did, you know, leaving corporate world and then moving into something else. And I think that's missing. Certainly in America, we don't put much emphasis on that. So since you live in other countries, do you see a difference in the culture of how they support our aging population?
Yes, I would say in Asia, the vulnerability is even less than in the Western world, and there's even less support than what we have. And I see that, for example, if I'm joining, you know, any support group meetings, and it doesn't matter if it's alcohol related or anything in the community, then they will be hiding much more than us Westerners. So if you think that is stigmatized in the Western world, you can multiply that many, many times in Asia. And many of these conversations are in some countries still illegal to have. And I just mentioned, for example, in Singapore, suicide, for example, suicide attempt was only decriminalized in 2020. So until then, if someone had a child who had an attempt at a suicide, you were scared of going and seek help at the doctor because the police would be brought in. So this is how sensitive these conversations are in Asia. So indeed, the Western world is leading. And I can add also that after the pandemic, I set up one of the masterminds I did is a men's group, and we are 17 men at a similar age, and still today we meet once a week for 1 hour on Zoom, where we discuss a different theme every week. This week it was about getting the motivation. Next week it's about nutrition, and we pick some topics like that, and we just log online and we keep sharing, because we believe that it was wonderful what happened during the pandemic, and we said, let's not stop this. We want to keep this going for the rest of our lives.
Wow, that's so encouraging. I love that. And I think particularly, if we think about gender, that women are more likely perhaps to reach out to a social circle and have more friends and willing to share a little bit more. And so I think it's particularly valuable for men. Certainly, I think in the Western culture, just for example, the training that I did as a coach was with This Naked Mind. And we don't have a lot of men. We're starting to see more men come through that as an alcohol-free coach, but it's just not as prevalent for men to come together in these groups and to support one another in those vulnerable ways, and to really set aside time to say, like, I'm going to talk about more than the football game and the new car I bought. I'm actually going to talk about these vulnerable topics that are, important to me.
Yeah, and what you mentioned here, Terry, is so important. And let me reflect on this as well, because before I had, should I say, my rock bottom, when I gave up alcohol and life was a turmoil for me, I had good friends, or I would say I would have called them great friends, and some of them are still in touch with me today. We would go out and play golf. We would go to the bar and watch a game of football. We would have a great time together. We were sharing and talking. But we never ever spoke about the challenging parts of our lives. We were never open and vulnerable to each other. So if I had a tough day at work, I would leave the office, being stressed and being anxious. And then I would go to the bar and drink alcohol and have a good time with my friends to get over that. The issue is with that the problems were there the next morning when I came back to the office. And then I went through a day of misery again, only to go and see my friends and have a good time in the evening. That these days now, when I remove the alcohol and I understand that I need to be in a structured way with other men, where we have an agenda and we are discussing and practicing, as I call it, our vulnerability muscle, that's when we are becoming close friends. And that is the friendship that I would encourage everyone to have.
Yes. And, I think we have to do some inner work to get to that place where we're willing to seek that out and we're open to the possibility of that. And I think that that's what's been so amazing for me to watch men and women go on this alcohol-free journey, because, as a coach, I see that alcohol is just the symptom. We're using alcohol to cover up that maybe place that's missing, where we feel deep connection, where we feel belonging, where we feel valued, seen, heard, supported. And so for me, I really believe that alcohol is the gateway to being able to show up and have these deeper connections. I used to think in my own life, Nick, I used to think that, well, I'm just not a very good friend. Like, I don't make friends easily. People don't really like me. I don't connect. I let people down. And I think in my own journey, what was happening was I was isolating. I was pulling back because I wasn't being true to me. And so, one of the first things that happened for me in this journey was I started making friends and started connecting with people in a different way and started feeling actually seen. And so I think that that's, what a gift that you are able to encourage other men to challenge themselves to seek this out and have, this opportunity to grow in that way.
Yeah, and what we do in order to encourage people to open up and be vulnerable is that we mix topics. So as I mentioned, the topic next week is about nutrition, which is an easy topic to share about. You can share a little bit about nutrition, what is working for you, if you take some supplements and any diet that works for you and so on. So then you get to practice and you talk and you listen, and then the following week we can have a more difficult topic, and it can be about relationships or something like that. And everyone is encouraged to share something that is challenging in their life, but end on a positive note with some tips, something that is working. So you also have a positive spin for it. And people who are joining in the group, the first couple of meetings might not disclose so much, but after a few sessions, they understand and start to feel, wow, I shared and I was vulnerable tonight. And then you feel great after that. And some people naturally also start to then reach out one-on-one online and offer a lunch or a coffee offline because they heard you out and they're there for you. Then you start to understand that the more I'm open here, the better support that I am. But it needs to be built by a safe place. So I would encourage all listeners to think about, who are the friends in my network, and build a group with those and start sharing, and they will see that the friendship will flourish.
Yes, yes, I love that. And you're right. It takes, we have to be in a safe place in order to start sharing. And that's a great tip, to start and mix up those topics so that you're not just asking people, tell me about your deepest, darkest secrets from day one. That never works, right? So you have another amazing part of your life that I want to touch on, and that is your success and your enjoyment of the sport of being a triathlete. And so you have been doing that. I'm curious, Nick, have you done that always, or is that also something that kind of came about from your alcohol-free journey?
I started in triathlon about 10 years ago now. So I had touched on it before I gave up alcohol, but it was a bit challenging to combine alcohol with triathlon because you have to swim and cycle and run quite far. So I didn't really enjoy it. I got a taste for it, but I was frustrated, and sometimes I was injured. Sometimes I couldn't even start the triathlon because I had been drinking too much alcohol leading up to the race a few days before, and then my body was not ready. When I stopped alcohol completely in 2018, everything changed and everything became possible. And it was a lot easier and much more enjoyable to train and to do the sport. And I met so many wonderful people all around the world thanks to triathlon as well.
Oh, that's exciting. So tell us a little bit about your success, because you have been successful.
Yeah, so what I did was that because I understood that, well, how I tackled my alcohol issue was by being honest and asking for help and working with people and coaches and so on who knew what they were doing. Then I thought I should apply this mentality to everything in my life. And that included the triathlons, my speaking career, my coaching, and everything else, just to have this learning, open, vulnerable mindset. So I started to really read all the books about triathlons, reaching out to coaches, joining triathlon clubs and associations, and always be the most curious one, always asking everyone for tips, support, and advice, and so on. And having that learning mindset constantly propelled me forward. And to the point now, I'm turning 50 soon, and I'm ranked top 2% in the world in my age group. And that is just a result from being curious. I have no talent whatsoever compared to anyone else. I just keep being hungry and curious.
Oh, I love that. Congratulations. And I love that word curious, because that is one thing that I always share with my clients that has really driven my life, certainly perhaps before I stopped drinking, but really identified as a core value. And what I find, Nick, is that when we lead with curiosity, we suspend judgment. So instead of saying, oh, I could never be a triathlete, we say, well, like, what would it take? How do people become triathletes? Like, what do they do? And we can do the same thing with all of these areas in our life. We can say, like, when we when we make a statement, there's often judgment with it, like, oh, I can't, or I'm just always this way. And instead, when we ask that question and we get curious, so much opens up. And so I love that, you just get curious. That's so fun. I do not see myself running a triathlon, but or competing in a triathlon. But my mentor in nutrition was a local woman who is an Ironman and does all these amazing races, and just qualified and competed in Kona last year. She'd then been a lifelong, or a career goal. And yeah, it's been amazing to watch her and talk about being curious and just allowing herself to keep engaging and move to that next level. So I just love that.
Thank you so much. And a huge part of this is also the social health here and the community around it, because it's also difficult to find our own tribes many times today in the fast-moving world. And if you do get into any sport like a triathlon or anything else, find your tribe, find what you love to do, and then you meet people who speak your language and you're passionate about the same thing, and then we spend time with other human beings, which we need to do, according to me, every day. Then it would be impossible for me to have time to socialize and exercise, and I know I need to do both, so I always try to combine it. Yes, sometimes I go for a run or a cycle or a swim by myself, but I try as much as possible to do it with a group, so I get both the social health and the physical health mixed together, and therefore I also get the mental health.
Yes. Let's streamline things. And you bring up an important point, finding your people. And that is something we have to pursue our passions. And, for me, when I took alcohol out of my life, the first thing I did was went to nutrition school. I'd always had a passion, but I was just a wellness enthusiast, not a wellness professional. And one thing, Nick, that was fascinating to me, I thought, well, these are wellness people. They won't be drinking. And so that wasn't true. So I'm curious about the triathlon world. Are there still people that drink, or is it just, the nature of it is that when they get to that elite level, they've recognized that drinking and success don't go together?
It's not much alcohol consumed in that community, actually. There are always a few people, but not much, I would say. Yeah, it's very healthy lifestyle, and people are looking for marginal gains these days, right? So you're trying to perhaps do it. Maybe they do at the end of the season or so on, but not often. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I often wonder how people could actually, be drinking on a regular basis and be highly successful in their athletic pursuits. And so it's mind-boggling to me when professional athletes will promote alcohol. And it's like, I bet you don't drink. My hunch is you're doing this because of the monetary, gain, not because you actually believe that drinking alcohol enhances your performance. It's just kind of, it's a little nutty.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And do you see, so I'm curious because you live in different parts of the world seasonally, right? Is there a different, in the Asian population, are that the local people running triathlons, is that a part of their culture? Or is that something that you kind of find expats get together and that's where you find your people?
So it's a growing sport also for Asians. I mean, it started in the US and then it's grown around the world. It's very established in Europe, but still, if you're looking at triathlon and so on, it's still a pretty young sport, and it is growing in Asia. But Asia has a lot of population also, and many cities are very large. So it's not so easy to exercise. When I lived in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, for example, I lived quite central, and people would even rent the bus and take the bus out of the city, and then you go for a run, and then you take the bus back, just because simply it would be too polluted or too crowded to run downtown. So you got to really be quite creative in how you set it up in order to get to the exercise. But it is increasing, and some other places in Asia is wonderful for exercising, including where I live in Phuket, Thailand, which is a very good place for cycling and swimming and running.
Oh, yeah, I bet. And so typically a triathlete will have one of the three sports that is kind of their sweet spot. For you, is it running, swimming, or cycling?
It would be running for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Are you going to be cheering on the runners at the Olympics?
Yeah, I will certainly do. And I have also my own biggest race of the year in 3 weeks. On August 15, I have my only full distance Ironman this year. I have 6, 7 or half distance one, but only one full. So I'm looking forward to racing in just a few weeks.
Oh, that's exciting. Where is that event taking place?
So it's in Sweden. It's in Kalmar, Sweden, in South Sweden, about 3.5 hours drive from Denmark. So it's one of the big races here, which the pros are racing as well. So it should be 2,500 athletes, a bit more.
Wow, that's so impressive. Yeah, I like to think I have other talents, Nick. However, I could get curious. I could hire a coach. I could start running. Who knows?
Yeah, you have your friend, right?
Yes, yes. And she is quite inspirational. She actually is a nutrition coach for athletes, to help them get to that place where they are making those marginal differences. Like nutrition is such a huge part of how we can be more successful in all our endeavors, certainly with showing up at that top level.
Yes, makes a big difference for sure.
Yeah, I love that you only run like 6 or 7 half marathons a year. It sounds impossible to a normal human.
Yeah, and I'm getting younger. At least I feel like so. So I just have to enjoy it as long as I can. I have a friend of mine. He's 57 years of age here in Sweden, and he has a motto basically saying that you are never too old to grow young.
Ooh, I really like that. And I think we have to insert a little bit of a caveat there, because I think some of the biohacking that we see these really ultra rich individuals doing can be kind of ridiculous. But I think that we also have so many misconceptions about what it means to grow older. And, for me, not drinking was a place where I started to prioritize my health. And so I definitely feel younger and healthier than I did. I'm 63. And so for me, I just feel like I'm just getting started in many ways.
Yeah, you look very young and fresh, Terry, for that. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely see so many people when we take alcohol out, we start to prioritize the things that help us feel better mentally, physically, and we do kind of start to age in reverse. So I love that. I also interviewed Todd Crandall, who is an Ironman and, uses his, running and sobriety as a foundation for his core business. So although I'm not a runner, I have these points of connection, and you guys are always so inspiring. Tell us the benefits of, exercise and mental health for people that are going, like, particularly for executives. Like, is that part of your coaching? Do you help them bring some form of physical activity into their life?
Yeah, I would, if I'm asked to give any tips or recommendation to anyone, then certainly exercise would be part of any regime. And I'm a believer, for a start, that we need to be close to nature as well. So I always, while it's great to be in gyms and so on, we still need to go out in the nature. We need to get daylight, and I would recommend anyone to include also something outdoor. And it doesn't matter if it's walking, running, or cycling, or something else that you do in the outdoor, but it just sort of resets the DNA and sets us up for the day. And it's nothing better than to start every day with that. And that's what I do. I try to start every morning with a run or a swimming in the ocean if it's warm enough, or a run in the outdoors. I get the fresh air, I get some sun, and then after that have a healthy breakfast and then start the day. So to get that out in the morning, and that's what I recommend everyone. And what I also recommend everyone is to really find what they love to do, because if you're trying to do something that is not right for you, then it's going to feel like a burden, and then it's not going to be sustainable. Then we can maintain it for a few weeks or during the coaching agreement, but then it's not something that is with you for life after. So those would be a few of my tips. And then it would be also to have wearable devices and sign up for some apps that are exciting, that give you some challenges, or sign up for a local race. And if it is running, then sign up for the local 5-mile run or fun run or something like that. So you have something for 3-4 months to look forward to. Invite a few friends, colleagues, or something, so that you have accountability partner. Go for some training, and then you won't cancel also. And that's what I do here. I have a triathlon also, a small one coming up in a few weeks here with my son and wife. So we will do it together as a team, where I will swim, my son will cycle, and then my wife will run. So we do it as a team. And so don't forget also to have fun and make it a part of a journey.
Yeah, such an excellent point. We don't stick to things that feel like a workout. I hate that term. I like movement, more than exercise or working out, because that really is what we're trying to do. If we look at our ancestors, they didn't work out. They stacked wood, they walked everywhere, they carried water, they did very different ways of moving their body. And so, that's the way we're designed. And we're not designed to go to a gym and do like one set of reps or whatever. And so I love the getting outside in the morning. So, of course, you're in Sweden currently, and you're from Sweden. So you guys have a culture of like cold plunge, saunas. And so it's sort of built into your DNA. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. So my exercise routine was today was a run outside in the morning to set me up nicely for the day. And then after work today, I went to swim, and I had a sauna as well just before I came here, Terry. So
how did I know?
Right.
Well, the other thing I want to make sure we touch on before you go, and this is a little bit of a darker subject, but you had a friend who committed suicide, and that has been a part of your kind of mission or passion, is to sort of bring that executive loneliness and that mental health piece into what you offer and the conversations that you have. Will you share a little bit about that?
Yes. So in 2019, I was about 1 year into my recovery. And that is when things changed. And as I earlier shared, also, that was the time when I started to share externally what had happened to me. And it was actually also the death of my friend Simon that also pushed me in this direction to speak up. Because I realized when I was looking back at myself, if I had continued to go down in my isolation, if I couldn't break the pattern, the negative spiral there, and stop the alcohol, I don't know if I would have been around today. And that was the realization I had in 2019 when I lost my friend Simon, because I had no idea what he was going through. No one of our friends had any idea. He had, in fact, just been on a trip that he said was the journey of his lifetime. He had saved up money. He went to Mount Everest. He climbed to the base camp, and he shared pictures, and everything looked so fantastic. And he shared on social media pictures of him and the girlfriend. And he wrote, "I've never been luckier or happier." And so that was all we saw. So when he was gone, it was just so sudden. And I became so sad and so angry also at the same time. And as often we blame perhaps ourselves, I wish I could have done more and so on. And that's when I decided to take action. And I decided to really openly talk about my own journey and how I broke out isolation. And I set up a charity fund also to raise awareness and money for suicide prevention. And this is something that I'm still doing today. And I'm there for men, especially because normally same gender want to have these close conversations. And I speak to many men who have had challenges and who are with us today, thanks to having had someone to talk to, and that I'm letting everyone know that I'm here if someone need to speak about something that is very, very perhaps difficult for them to talk about, but I'm there as a confidential and anonymous person for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful work. And I think that, one of the amazing things about this human existence is that pain can ultimately, there can be some, not purpose per se, but we can kind of, share the message, and we can reach other people and feel that there was, even though Simon is gone, that you have this through line in your own life where you are thinking of him and touching other lives and sharing, part of him and his story. And that keeps his spirit alive. And it's such a beautiful gift to the world.
Yeah, thank you. And I called up his brother when this happened, and I asked him what I could do, and I shared my plans with him, and he said, "Go ahead and do it, and shout out the message loud." And that is what I'm doing, and that is what we need to do, Terry. And thank you also for the having this podcast and sharing these messages and normalizing these conversations, because that is the starting point for making all of this possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We have to bring the shame and the guilt of addiction out of the closet. And we have to really address the mental health piece and the loneliness epidemic. And so, yeah, it's just the time is now. We can't wait. It's, and I feel so fortunate to be at this place where even just 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when I was still struggling, there wasn't really identified alcohol-free coaches. There weren't these larger groups that are now available for people. There wasn't another way beyond 12 steps, really, that was publicized and available to the extent that it is now. And I just feel so blessed to be a part of that work, because it's so valuable for people to feel like there is a connection point for them, and there are other people that have gone before them, and they can see a different way. And what I love about having this conversation with you, Nick, is you're such an inspiration. Like, you were in a dark place, but you didn't stay there. And that is, and on the other side of that dark place, not only did you change personally, but now you have this global reach for people who are also just a little bit behind. I'm not an expert. I'm sure you don't consider yourself an expert. We're just humans, right? Having these conversations and opening the door for people.
Yes, absolutely. And well said, Terry. And I'm also so happy to be part of this wave. And I've seen it happen, and you have as well, I'm sure, with nicotine and cigarettes and so on. We saw it when it was, booming in the 80s and perhaps 70s, 80s. And then it sort of stopped. And these days it's quite rare. And I'm glad to see that alcohol is following this path. And my son, who's a teenager now, 15, it's not as trendy and as popular as it was when I was a teenager. And I'm just very happy for that. And it's a lot more non-alcoholic drinks available, and people are not looking so strangely at you anymore if you choose something without alcohol. And I'm expecting, and I will support that trend continues.
Yes. Yeah. We're definitely hoping to see some new guidelines in 2025 here in the United States around recommendations for alcohol. It's kind of ridiculous to think that in the United States, we currently have, for women, this is mind-boggling, 7 drinks per week is considered the threshold, but 8 is considered heavy drinking. And it's like, wait a minute, there's a fine line between 7 drinks and 8 drinks. Why isn't it 1 drink and 8 drinks? We just don't really have a handle, and we're not having we're not paying attention to the impacts or all of the impacts of alcohol. And what are the guidelines currently do you know, Nick, in the countries where you live in Thailand and in Sweden? What are the guidelines for men and women for drinking?
I don't actually know the guidelines, but I heard that they've done some research in Sweden about it, and the specialist and the expert that they had consulted said that everything above 2 drinks a year could be harmless. So that is the guideline that I heard.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, you guys are also, the people that go in a sauna every day, so you got it figured out. We are far behind. And how about in Thailand? Is alcohol still kind of at the forefront of socializing, and what's going on with that country in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, in Thailand and Southeast Asia and so on, drinking is not as popular in general as in the Western world. It is more of a trendy thing for the younger and business people and that kind of community where it's expected. But otherwise, you rarely see it among the normal people who live in the rural areas and so on. It has not been advertised, or it hasn't been part of the same kind of era that we have seen it. And I think the issue in the West is that it's been so much advertising money poured into it, and it's part of the movies, and it's part of our culture, the brands, and that is where the issue sits.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm glad that Sweden is 2 drinks a year. I think that's amazing. That'd be about right. There really are people that maybe have 1 drink a year, and alcohol just isn't a thing. And so I think that it's powerful to just see that alcohol doesn't have to be a part of everyone's life. So, and I'm pleased about your son. What a great example you're setting, and opportunity for him to grow up in a world where things look different.
Absolutely. That's a positive way to phrase it. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on the Sober Edge podcast. It's delightful to talk to you. Excited for your upcoming race. Good luck. I'm sure it will go well. And tell us where people can find you.
Yeah, so there's a few ways they can find me. The first is if they want to check out my book, Executive Loneliness. It's available on Amazon as a paper copy, also Kindle. It's also there's an Audible book if anyone prefer the audio book. Otherwise, I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and they can look up Nick Jonsson. It's NickJonsson.
Very nice. Great. All right. Well, particularly for the males listening in, if you're looking for some support and an example of, being an executive and being a vulnerable and curious a male figure in this alcohol-free space, I recommend that you connect with Nick. And thank you again so much. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks to the listeners.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.